Headquarters of common sense.
Talk Radio.
I've got to be honest with you, I wish there was stuff in this report that surprises me, but I'm as depressed by this as I thought I would be, on the basis that, what a surprise, locking children in their homes, putting them in front of screens and only seeing adults with masks on for a couple of years hasn't done them any good.
Absolutely. And we've been talking about this for a while now. We got a lot of attention last year when we were saying we mustn't furlough children's futures. What we're seeing in nurseries and primary schools, colleges, even now, shows how much impact these harms have had. Looking at the youngest children, the speech and language delays, the problems with interpreting facial expressions, the sort of delay in developing social confidence, understanding how to interact with others, physical development, things as basic as crawling and walking, the obesity levels, and the loss of the self-care skills. We've talked about potty training, but it's other things. It's doing up your shoes, it's hanging up your coat, all the things that give children the independence to function well in early education, to get on well at school. So much has been missed.
That's it. And these are key developments, aren't they? And we already had an issue before we had lockdown about lots of children who were just living on screens. They weren't exercising. They weren't having enough interaction with other human beings face to face, learning to read those facial cues that are so important in terms of socialisation and being able to make friends and understand when someone's unhappy or angry or sad, or happy indeed. And we've lost that. Whenever I see, gosh, my heart breaks every time I see a child on public transport, we're walking around the street wearing a mask, especially when they're like 6 years old. I think, frankly, the parents should be imprisoned. I'm just absolutely horrified by that. But the damage done just by the fact that children can't they can't see adults' faces. Children learn to speak, not just by hearing language, but by seeing your mouth and seeing what you're doing with your lips and your tongue. How on earth did no one in government realise this? Because I was talking about this in March, long before we even locked down, about how we should never lock down the schools, never close the schools. I've always thought it was insane. But the evidence was really, really clear, really early on, about how much damage was being done. And then they did it again in January 2021.
I think what we're seeing is the unintended consequences here. I think the focus was so much on public health. I think it was I can't comment on the public health side, but it was obviously very difficult to get people into a place to weigh up the immediate health concerns and the likely longer term impacts of these policies. So it's good to be able to report this and to get this message out so clearly that 2 years on, we can really see this harm. So in many nursery schools, colleges, that it's not something that children were just able to pick up and get on as though nothing had happened. It's got real impact. And the good news is that nursery schools, colleges seem to be acting intelligently, making good use of time, working out where children are, teaching them from where they are. By and large, the right things are happening. But nevertheless, it's a big setback for so many children.
And again, we know perfectly well which children are the ones who are facing the biggest setback, and they're the kids already in disadvantaged homes, the kids who were, when we had things like Sure Start, the whole point was to get children out of homes where they're not being stimulated, when people, even in the best of times, were not really talking to their kids, putting them in front of screens and just, have some more food and shut up and watch the telly, as opposed to, being stimulated, playing games and doing jigsaws and all that stuff that's exhausting for parents who are making the effort. But so we know that it's the kids who are already disadvantaged. They were the hardest hit.
Absolutely, and this is not a judgment on those families. Nope. It's the families living in the smallest spaces, the families without gardens. Also, the people's anxiety levels about COVID varied. Some parents got much more anxious than others. Yeah. There's a whole set of things that have influenced quite how limited children's experiences over the last 2 years have been. And it's really, really important that we concentrate on giving our children the very best experience we can for the future.
Amanda, you always stick to, your brief, which is, the children. That's what you're responsible for, is their learning, their development and what's going on in schools. If there is any lesson to be learnt from this, is the lesson we must never, ever close our schools again?
I think we were undervaluing our nurseries, our schools. I think we've seen quite how immensely valuable they are for children's development. I think the idea that for more than the shortest period, you can stop that without really big consequences must now be put aside. It's clear that being in education, that this structured process where any one day you can't say does something absolutely essential, but where it's the accumulation, the repetition, the practice, interrupting that for a prolonged period has had so much effect.
Good talk.
Hot talk. Bold talk. Talk radio.
Listen on your smart speaker.
Watch it live on your smart TV.
The world headquarters of common sense.
Talk Radio.